Greetings, gentle observer, and welcome. I am RDF, and I thank you for watching my humble video, and I do so hope you will subscribe and press the notification bell. Within a previous video I proved conclusively that atmospheric carbon dioxide, or CO2, is not the cause of any observed rise in global temperatures, and so busted the biggest myth of all. Within this video then, I shall now bust some of the other climate change myths. Myths that have come to be accepted as real and as factual. Beginning with myth number 1. If the ice at the North Pole were to melt, then sea levels would rise by 50 feet, inundating coastal communities. False. The truth is, of course, that were the ice at the North Pole to melt, sea levels would stay exactly where they are today. This is because this ice is free floating and so displaces its own volume with water. As if to prove this concept, simply put a number of ice cubes in a glass and then cover them with water, and mark the level of this water on the glass. Come back when the ice cubes have melted, and you will see that the water level is exactly the same, and what is true for ice and water in a glass is equally as true for the North Polar ice sheet. Myth number 2. We need to grow hundreds of thousands of trees in order to remove CO2 from the atmosphere and so combat climate change. False. Trees, as with all terrestrial vegetation, form part of the carbon cycle. This being so, trees do indeed absorb atmospheric CO2 when growing, but then go on to release this same CO2 back into the atmosphere when dead and decaying. Thus, the planting of numerous trees will accomplish absolutely nothing at all in the long term. In the short term, however, these hundreds of thousands of trees will rob the atmosphere of valuable CO2. CO2 that should be reserved for food crops. Thus, the planting of such trees is counterproductive and detrimental to human food production. I would mention that whilst I like trees, in agricultural terms they are nothing more than giant, inedible weeds. Myth number 3. The number of polar bears is falling to near extinction levels. False. The polar bear population was estimated, following a study conducted in the 1970s, to be around 5,000 at that time, whereas a recent head count put the polar bear population at some 27,000. There is, of course, a wide margin of error in both figures, but polar bears would appear to be doing just fine. Myth number 4. Increasing atmospheric temperatures are turning lush grasslands into deserts. False. The increasing amount of CO2 within the atmosphere is in fact turning deserts into lush grasslands, as can be so confirmed by a perusal of the NASA website on the subject of the CO2 greening effect. Myth number 5. Fossil fuels are bad and should therefore be phased out. False. Fossil fuels, as used from around 1750, have transformed human society beyond all recognition, from a life of drudgery, toil and disease, wherein life expectancy was less than 30, to a lifestyle not enjoyed by monarchs in former days. Fossil fuels have given us all the trimmings of luxury we all take so much for granted. Luxuries such as cars, TV sets and washing machines. Fossil fuels have also given us a fantastic healthcare system, meaning life expectancy has gone from less than 30 in pre-fossil fuel days to a life expectancy nearing 80 today. Fossil fuels have also given us things such as clean fresh water at the turn of a tap, supermarkets full of food from all over the world, personal security and freedom. All of these things and much, much more we owe to fossil fuels. The only real problem with fossil fuels, coal, natural gas and oil, is that they are running out. And we now face the very real danger of a looming, unprecedented energy crisis. And just as our use of fossil fuels transforms society for the better, their demise will likewise change the very nature of our civilization into what many scientists are now calling the post-industrial Stone Age. Myth number 6. Climate change is causing thousands of animals to become extinct year upon year. False. Animal extinctions reached their zenith during the era of European exploration. For should a ship make landfall upon some remote Pacific island, for example, then the sailors, once ashore, would invariably kill the local animals, either for food or for sport. Birds were particularly vulnerable, as many island-dwelling birds had lost the ability to fly, and so were very easy to catch and very easy to kill. As if this were not bad enough, when these explorers left such islands, they would invariably leave behind cats and rats that would go on killing the indigenous animals right up to the present day. Nowadays we are much more conscious of animal well-being and take extra care of animals whose numbers are dwindling. So much so that the number of animal extinctions over the last 40 years cannot be measured in thousands or even hundreds, but the actual figure is just 2. Yes, you heard me correctly. The number of animal extinctions over the last 40 years has been just 2. This being so, I remain unclear just what the Extinction Rebellion people are protesting for, or indeed against. Myth number 7. CO2 is the main greenhouse gas. False. The main and overriding greenhouse gas is water vapour, which, dependent upon location and time of year, can account for up to 98% of the greenhouse gas effect. Myth number 8. The greenhouse effect is bad. False. The mean temperature of the Earth is some 15 degrees Celsius, whereas without the greenhouse effect, the Earth's temperature would be some minus 20 degrees Celsius, and life on Earth could simply not exist. Myth number 9. CO2 is a pollutant. False. Whenever CO2 is mentioned or shown on TV, for example, then invariably an image of smoking chimney stacks is simultaneously shown, implying that what we are seeing is CO2. But CO2 is a colourless, tasteless, odourless gas, undetectable by human senses. And what we are really seeing are noxious gas and fumes and particulates, totally unrelated to benign CO2. Myth number 10. 97% of climate scientists believe that man's activities are having or will have a catastrophic effect upon the world's climate. False. I have left this particular myth until last, as it is the one most quoted to me whenever discussing the man-made climate change fairy story. And when this myth is put to me, I invariably ask, how does the speaker know this to be so? Where did this 97% figure come from? And just as invariably, no one seems to know, with "I read it somewhere" or "it is common knowledge" being the two most common answers. Well, I can now reveal that this oft-quoted myth can be traced back to one Mr. John Cook, a fellow with the Institute for Climate Studies in Australia. Mr. Cook claims to have studied the scientific papers of over 11,000 climate scientists before he came up with the 97% figure. However, his work has since been condemned as a travesty of the scientific principle, for it seems only 2% of the scientists under study believe that man's activities might, I repeat, might have a detrimental impact upon the climate. Mr. Cook went from 2% to 97% by what people in business call creative accounting. Moreover, even if we accept the 97% figure as correct, consensus is not science and is therefore meaningless. Imagine, if you will, a man standing in the dock charged with murder. And further imagine a police officer is acting as a witness for the prosecution. This officer proceeds to give some circumstantial evidence, some hearsay, some might be's and some could be's. So much so that the judge asks the officer if he has any hard evidence to prove the man's guilt. To which the officer replies by saying that he does not have any evidence per se, but 97% of police officers think he is guilty. Were this to be so, the judge would instantly halt the trial and the accused man would be set free. For consensus of opinion without proof is totally and utterly meaningless. There are, of course, many other lesser climate change myths, with some being more bizarre than others. But it would appear that, in their ignorance, the climate alarmists are willing to accept any and all such myths as being real and genuine. I am RDF, and I thank you for watching.